This is Alexei Navalny, opposition politician, public figure, lawyer, icon of the liberal crowd in Russia, and internationally known anti-corruption activist. But is he really as good as you think? Does Navalny really deserve all the honor the world bestows upon him? Let's figure it out. I'm Drutska, and today we will talk about what is wrong with Alexei Navalny. Why is he so tolerated in Western countries and disliked in post-Soviet countries, except of Russia, of course? It's an interesting question, and we will try to answer it in this video. In this image, you see Alexei Navalny's family and director Daniel Royer, who just received world-renowned statue for a documentary about Navalny. But wait, stop. Isn't this the same film award that positions itself as politically distant and uninvolved, but at the same time a documentary film about the hard life of a Russian politician receives a statue? And at the same time, this film award, for no apparent reason, refuses to broadcast a message from the president of a warring country, Volodymyr Zelensky. I didn't mix anything up, did I? But you know what? I'm frankly glad that it turned out this way. Against this backdrop, my material will be even more eloquent, and I sincerely hope that many Europeans and Americans will reflect on whom they should tolerate and whom not. Also, this video will be a great testimony of how the pro-Russian lobby works in various spheres, in our case, in the film industry. And so, Alexei Navalny, Russian politician, oppositionist, anti-corruption fighter, liberal, or no, I obviously got something mixed up with the liberal. Is Alexei Navalny Democrat, though against something is off. It is known as moderate nationalist. You just confuse yourself, I'm pretty sure. The problem is that Alexei Navalny is quite a political opportunist who, depending on circumstances, constantly changed his position. And as a rule, it happened in order to win the favor of many people or simply not to lose his audience. But I know for sure that Navalny is a xenophobe who successfully camouflaged and then even apologized for his statements because he had not to lose his electorate. But moving from accusation to specific facts, in August 8, 2008, Russia began a military aggression against Georgia. By the way, President Putin called it an operation to enforce peace. Doesn't remind you of anything? Are there any association with special military operation? And now you will see a screenshot from Alexei Navalny's blog, which he kept on one of the Russian platforms. Provide serious military and financial assistance to South Ossetia and Abkhazia to the extent that Abkhazia is actually ready to fight in South Ossetia. Declare South Ossetia a no-flying zone and immediately shoot down any aircraft found in this zone. Declare a total blockade of Georgia. Seize all communications with this. Expel all Georgian citizens currently on our territory from the Russian Federation. In this post, Navalny calls the Georgians rodents and really wants to launch a missile on their general headquarters. How do you like such an oppositionist? Not bad, right? But I know for sure that every person has a right to make a mistake. After all, we are not perfect with you, and maybe Navalny is different. He changed, became better, and yes, it happened. Navalny apologized both to the Georgians and Saakashvili for his 2008, but you know when? In April 2023. In my opinion, it's a little bit late. Don't you think so? Before we move on, I will remind you to subscribe to my channel and like this video. And if you think my videos help you better understand Ukraine and what's going on around, you can support me on Patreon and buy me a coffee. I will leave links below. Let's move on. In this photo, you can see Alexei Navalny at a demonstration which in Russia is called the Russian March. I advise you to pay attention to the flags with which the demonstrators are going. It is the flag of the Russian Empire, which was used from 1858 to 1896. This flag is very fond of being used by modern Russian monarchies and nationalists, starting from very moderate ones and ending with all outright neo-Nazis, arguing that when this flag was used by the Russian Empire, it did not lose any war. For example, there is a primary sacred significance. But do you know what? This flag here. And this flag was proposed by the terrorists of the so-called Novorossiya as the state flag. For those who are not aware, the so-called Novorossiya is an entity that was supposed to include all of central, southern and part of eastern Ukraine. One of the main ideologists of this movement was the well-known international terrorist Igor Girkin, who was one of those who started the undeclared war in eastern Ukraine. And this is a patch of Russian neo-Nazis from the Rusich detachment, which has been fighting since 2014 and is still fighting now. Not a bad company, right? Navalny and the neo-Nazis. Now, we probably had to say a couple of important things about the flag under which nationalists in Russia come out, but I will put this aside for now and will remind you a little later. But let's be objective. Healthy nationalism is quite normal, but only when it does not turn into some extreme forms. Ask yourself, please, would you, as a moderate nationalist, go to a demonstration knowing that neo-Nazis will be walking next to you? It turns out that in this way you legalize them and do not refuse their existence next to you, right? It seems that Alexei Navalny did not ask himself such questions, but believe me, Alexei Navalny is always where it is profitable for him. And now I will demonstrate this to you. In 2013, Alexei Navalny ran for mayor of Moscow. A year before that, he refused to participate in the Russian March, allegedly due to illness, but still tolerate his sympathy to the ideas of this movement to his supporters. During his campaign in the mayoral election, Navalny promoted his candidacy using two main narratives. The first is transparency of the Moscow budget, and the second is to solve the migrants' problems from Central Asia and the Caucasus in Moscow. How's that for a twist, right? But no, wait, you probably will say now that Navalny probably just wanted to create additional jobs, overcome ethnic crime, and create all conditions for successful assimilation. I will disappoint you. He promised to reduce the number of migrants in Moscow by introducing a strict visa regime. I wonder why that is. What kind of ideas was Alexei Navalny guided by in his fight against migrants? And you know what's funny about this situation? In the same year of 2013, Navalny again refused to participate in the Russian March, stating that he, as a former candidate for mayor, bears a lot of responsibility. So what do we see? Obviously, Navalny already felt what big politics is and started playing with different audiences, tolerating certain ideas at a convenient moment for him. But when this audience becomes too toxic for his own promotion, it is simply thrown out. I must admit, Navalny is a very capable person who has gathered around him a lot of people with different views thanks to skillful manipulations. Now let's move to 2014, when the Revolution of Dignity had already taken place and the undeclared war began. Russia annexes Crimea, and in the east of the country, Russians appear with local separatists.
Если вы станете президентом, вы попробуете вернуть Крым Украине?
Крым – это что, бутерброд с колбасой, чтобы вот туда-сюда возвращать? Украинцам я сильно советую не обманывать тоже себя. Он останется частью России и больше никогда в обозримом будущем не станет частью Украины.
And now we return to the flag of the Russian Empire. As I already mentioned, Russian nationalists and monarchists used this flag because when it flew over the empire, Russia did not lose wars. It has a sort of sacred meaning. But this is just one side of the coin. Here is another. This is a map of the Russian Empire as of 1914, before the start of World War I. As you can see, at the same time, Monster covered a vast amount of territory where a multitude of independent states are now located. This phantom pain from the lost empire initially haunted Soviet Russia when it began to collect the remnants of the empire after the October Revolution, and now this pain haunts modern Russia. On your screenshots, you see a memory of a state that is degrading and can only offer its citizens that part of history where it was once great. All the ambitions of the Russian rulers are hidden in this map. And what about this wonderful anti-corruption activist and Russian politician? He begins to play on the topic of Crimea again, trying to appeal to different audience. That's why he speaks about Crimea, constantly changing his position. And his desires and ambitions as a moderate nationalist are layered on top of this all. It turned out well, didn't it? So how does Navalny differ from Vladimir Putin? Does he prevent stealing? Probably. But how quickly will he turn into the same Putin, not in terms of greed, but in terms of imperial ambitions? Everyone knows that Putin wants Russia to be the size of the former Soviet Union. Of course, he choked on Ukraine, but what will happen next? What will happen when Putin is overthrown and Navalny gets out of prison? A political regime prisoner, corruption fighter, political figure, and so on. The ideal presidential candidate that the despised and broken Russia has been waiting for, which needs a strong leader and an economic miracle. They say history has answers to all questions. After World War I, the Entente countries remained winners, and they drove the losing Germany into terrible conditions. And then he came, ambitious, able to lead people, declaring narratives that everyone likes, and fulfilling his promises. Hitler raised Germany from ruins, and then the world plunged into the continuation of World War I. Of course, I'm probably winding up the situation too much now, diving into alternative history, and my analogies are not objective, but believe me, Navalny is not as good as he seems at first glance. I will draw another analogy. This is Knut Hamsun. In 1920, he received the Nobel Prize in Literature for the novel Growth of the Soil. It's an incredible book that is worth reading even now. And he is also a Nazi who later gave his Nobel laureate medal to Joseph Goebbels and became a Nobel laureate even before Hitler came to power in Germany. And Alexei Navalny is a laureate of the Sakharov Prize. His family received an Oscar for the film about Navalny. But all this happened after the war in Georgia, after the Russian marches, after the annexation of Crimea, and the beginning of the Great War. And you know what? Now Navalny declares his support for Ukraine, and this is very much liked by the Western audience, which sees only a political prisoner with whom the regime is fighting, who was prisoned, and so on. But you only see Navalny's bright side. Think about that. People love to create idols for themselves, but when these idols turn out to be terrible monsters, few are ready to admit their mistakes. Did I say that Crimea is not a sandwich? Not even a vegetarian. I don't see the connection, but it's not even a vegetarian sandwich. Crimea is not a sandwich.